Hi, welcome back to the Roland Theater and to the Center Film Festival. We are very happy to be a part of this wonderful festival again, and we're very, very grateful to be one of the nonprofits receiving a portion of the ticket proceeds. That is really going to help us. We are in the middle of a seating project. The theater is going to turn 104 years old in 2021. The seating is decades and decades old and it has really needed to be replaced. So these funds will help us. These funds will also help us survive COVID. We're struggling, we're hoping to get to our seating project, and every little bit helps. We're really looking forward to a great weekend of films, and we know you are too. And hopefully in the future, we can actually all be together at the Roland Theater. Thank you.
My name's Skerrick, and I will be making a cocktail for you today called the Panacea 2020. So we're going to need some high-quality rye whiskey. Today we're going to use Michter's, some Scotch whiskey, preferably something smoky like Lefroy, fresh lemon, either honey or Benedictine liqueur, and if you have a bottle of red wine laying around, we'll put it to use. We'll use an ounce of egg whites, ounce and a half of rye whiskey, a third to a half of an ounce of Lefroy Scotch. A secret ingredient of mine is turmeric tincture. It's literally turmeric and vodka. That's all. Put a little bit of lemon juice.
Yum.
Half ounce. And some simple syrup. The crap out of it.
Ooh, the wine. Forgot about the wine. Ooh, that's beautiful.
We're making this drink for the film festival, and we're just going to garnish it with an orange slice. Mine's getting paired with the pandemic shorts.
Yeah. Do you have cute pandemic shorts, Skerrick?
No, ma'am. Sorry.
Welcome back, everybody, to not our second, not our third, fourth, fifth, or sixth. I think it might be our seventh Q&A today. We're super excited to be back here with you live on Facebook or YouTube. Please engage with us in the comment section. These films are incredible. We love having it here on Saturday night. They have been winning awards and playing at festivals across the United States and abroad. We'll hear later about what's happening with their work now, what else these filmmakers are working on. We have April Wright with us, Rani Deighe Crowe, and Jeanette L. These are the directors of the films you just watched. The seat drive that you just heard about at the Roland, that's the home theater we wish we were at right now, that beautiful cinematic treasure in Phillipsburg, PA. We hope to have all three of you back here again so you can experience that. We hope to have all of you out there come and visit us there if you're not already in Phillipsburg or State College. But for now, we're going to stay safe. We're going to stay virtual, and we'll still have engaging conversations. We're looking at 3 people calling in from 3 totally different places around the United States. So that's one of the perks that we have today, is that we have them all here. And the drink, well, we'd love to literally have it with you, but please go ahead and try it at home. If Skerrick's drinks are too complicated, that's why I just go there and drink. But unfortunately, it's more difficult now. He is wearing a really good leather mask, PS, wherever you want to do with that. He did talk to me about his mask. I don't know why Kurt, the man behind the curtain down there running this entire show, just cut in the part where I asked him about his pandemic shorts. But that's okay, Kurt. One of these days, I'll get you back. So what I wanted to open with is the fact that I actually know all these 3 women who have made these incredible works. I met Rani Deighe Crowe and Jeanette L in Ohio when we were all at Ohio University. And April Wright is somebody who won one of our Best Film Awards last year with her short on actually movie theater, Cinematic Treasures, and she can tell you more about that too. So with that, I'm just gonna open the conversation and ask all of you just to tell us a little bit about what made you take this project on, how does this fit into your body of work, and yeah, you know what? Those are good starting questions. So what made you take this project on, and how does it fit into your body of work? We'll start with you, Jeanette. And you're muted. Let me unmute you. Done.
You have to I think you have to unmute me. Yes, thank you. I was afraid you're going to start with me.
Alphabetical.
Yeah. This just happened to me last one I was on. Okay, I think that So Quiet on Set is a project about, a film about, a story about a woman that gets, an actor that gets sexually assaulted on a film set while a intimate scene is being filmed. So why would I want to make this now, right? So I usually think like, oh, why are we making this now? At about 2016, there was this show happening in Chicago that was getting amazing reviews because it was so lifelike, and a woman was actually getting choked every night on stage. It was not a stunt. It was not choreographed. It was a woman was actually going home at night and with bruises, and her roommate finally stepped in, and that led to something called Not in Our House Chicago, which is an organization about changing the way actors and women are treated in in the audition process, in the rehearsal process, in the theatrical world. And when Rani and I were starting to talk about this story, that was really in my mind. That fact that 2016 was a little bit before the 2017 of the reimagining and the re-entering of the Me Too movement, which had started in like 2006. That was coming to the forefront with what was happening in the film industry. So the story is current. So it's and it's also about how women are treated in the world, and about the situation in this particular situation in this world, which is the world that I spend most of my time in film and theater. This is what happens to women in this situation, or can happen and has happened. So it's important to me to tell those kind of stories. And in terms of my body of work, it's really important to me to represent women on screen. It's really important to tell women's stories. A lot of my films have more queer content in them than this one does, but still, it's an important story to tell. And from the point of view of the director in this film, I have often, in thinking about the situation, it's like, have I ever done anything similar? Like, am I culpable? Have I made an actor feel uncomfortable? And so also questioning myself about, like, what have I done to get a shot? How has the tyranny of the shot consumed me on set? And have I, what have I done that was inappropriate, or have I done things that are inappropriate? So I think I always like to ask questions through my films, and I think questioning yourself is a good storytelling method.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. I was thinking a lot about that, especially from the very first shot of the short. I thought about that, and what I know, and I'll share now, and maybe you could talk a teeny bit more about that within the context of the oeuvre of your work. You have experience in both, and I think you started in theater, am I right? And you did a lot of work in theater. And to me, and obviously talk about your approach, but to me, the difference, one of the many and maybe larger differences, is that an audience can choose where to look when you're in a theater, whereas there's such a power in framing. And this, one of your first shots, literally, is what's being seen in the screen. Is it okay? Is it not okay? So it's almost like, this is why we called it behind the scenes, obviously, with both of your films and also with April's film. Really looking at what's going on and how these decisions are being made and how people are treated both in front of the camera and behind the camera. I thought about that instantly, Jeanette, when I saw that piece. And it's like, I think 1 or 2 shots in, they're already sitting there and talking about the framing. And I also love that you picked a female director. I thought that was really a strong decision. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that theater film connection, the framing and not framing. And you don't have to talk about that specifically if you don't want to, but that's what struck me, especially since I know some of your other work.
Well, I started as a photographer. So photography, then theater, and then the two together in film. So yeah, I mean, I think the thing that is, I would say the thing that links them for me very much is working with actors and telling a dramatic story, a narrative through working with actors and the collaborative process. And working with Rani, working with writers, or the collaborative process of storytelling is really interesting and what's compelling to me. And yeah, I think framing is really comes from my training as a photographer. So those two things like make sense to me. I love, yeah, that's just something I love to do. I love to look at, you know, foreground, midground, background. There's some things that are my favorite shots to shoot. If you look at a couple of my films together, you'll be like, oh, there's that shot again. She loves that shot, you know. So there's things that I appreciate. And then, you know, I worked with an amazing cinematographer, Wenting, and Wenting Fisher, and that was, you know, it was extraordinary to work with someone that has such an amazing eye. So and ability to light. So yeah. I think I'm not exactly sure if I'm answering your question, but
you are, and it's a great
storytelling. To me, I'm interested in storytelling.
Yeah, and we can come back to it more as we continue to talk about what's going on in front of the camera, the decisions you're making as a director, and then the decisions that you made for the fictionalized director. But it's also a really good transition to Rani. You do collaborate a lot together. Rani, can you talk a little bit about how you and Jeanette met, and also why, and then answer those two other questions, why you took on the project and how it fits into your work? You're muted now. We get to say that a couple times in each one, just so you guys know. We say you're muted.
Okay, it's like trying to unlock the car door when you're both trying to lock it and unlock it. We met at OU. Jeanette was a professor at the time, and I was in grad school, and I worked on her film she was making, and we just worked well together. So we've made a few pieces together at this point, and we kind of have a production company, Crone Heights, which is what we use when we make work together. And you know, one of the missions is to make films that put women behind and in front of the camera. More women behind and in front of the camera. So it's kind of the collective mission. What were the questions again?
Why did you decide that particular
as
script?
far as yeah, so this was my response to Me Too. I mean, it was my response to Me Too, and it was you know, all of it was going on. Yes, being very aware of what was happening in theater and in film as far as intimacy coordinators, and reading a lot of the stories that had come out about women on set and things that had happened. But it was me trying to respond to what was happening in Me Too, and the fact, you know, to put it in that situation, right, where you have an actress who has agreed to be in a scene. So there's consent. You're dealing with issues of consent. They have consented to be in a scene. They have signed a contract. They've consented to this, this, and this, and this. They're doing it for pay. Everybody can see them. We're all consuming it. And everybody is watching. And then for something still to happen, and still nobody believes her. Still nobody sees it. And so that was, you know, kind of the original impulse, was how to make it as complicated as possible to put a person in a situation where you could actually witness this. And it tied into lots of other stories, you know, we were reading and thinking about. And then Christine Blasey Ford testified. And that for me, as I was sort of rewriting it and going into the second or third drafts, that was really heavy on my mind. Like, how could the entire country be watching a woman saying what had happened, and people don't have the same idea of what happened, right? And we're all digesting this. So, you know, it was all those things. And I wanted to, you know, I also come from kind of a theater background, so, which is, I think, one of the reasons that Jeanette and I kind of clicked. We both like to collaborate, and we both have certain sensibilities that cross over. So for me, I think coming from a theater background, and also, you know, a certain amount of feminist film background, there's a certain amount of my work that often comes from, you know, where do we position the audience? Like, what is the relationship to the audience? Not just something that you're watching as a film on screen, but it's actually, you know, and this is very much, we are making the audience a character. And that was, you know, in finding it in the edits, with like, when we decided to, you know, when Jeanette found that film and that's the last shot at the end, looking out at the audience. And that's when we knew we needed to put something at the top with the mouse, to really create the audience as the viewer and sort of from the beginning. I have a dog.
And your dog has something to say.
It's not like what's going on outside. She doesn't know. She should be quiet right now. And then what was the other question? There was another question.
How does this fit into your body of work? Though I think you're mentioning that, but go ahead and elaborate if you want to talk more about that.
I mean, I think that I don't know. I mean, you know, it's you know, a lot of our work has to do with including more women on screen and behind screen. So, you know, we had the writer producer, we had the director, we had an editor, our cinematographer, our composer, our art designer. So we had a lot of women on set and in the film, and then trying to tell their stories. And I think just it also, I mean, you know, we previously our film, I noticed that in a lot of my work, one of the things that I'm noticing is these interesting qualities of the screen, of like distancing, of like, how does the screen come in to play? Mm-hmm. What is the fact that even the director on set, you know, like, even though they're right there in front of it, they're like distanced by the screen. Everybody's watching it on a screen. And how does that disengage us from the person who's being exploited in the process?
Right.
And that seems to be something that's popping up a lot in some of my stuff. So.
Yeah, it's a great opening montage. In a way, it's almost like everyone's kind of slave to the screen in a way, and make certain decisions based on it. This is what we talked about a little earlier about the framing and the power. It's worth mentioning again, you know, you choosing to make the director a woman. So when you talk about putting women in front and behind the camera, you're also holding everyone accountable, not just the audience, not just male directors, or however people identify, but also women and people who could be victimized by them.
Yeah.
It would just be so easy for it to be a man. It'd be, you know, it'd be too simplistic. Yeah.
And it didn't call into question the history of this decision being made, and then the way in which an audience has been developed to be so hungry for that.
I mean, and when we first did it, as soon as I like kind of conceived it and started putting it on paper, and Jeanette and I talked, and it was like, I think, because I didn't give there was just called the director, you know, because I always like to leave things really fluid at the beginning. And then we talked, and it was like, I think this needs to be a woman. And we were both like, yeah, it needs to be a woman, because otherwise it's just too easy. I don't want it to be a sleazy director. And she didn't either. And that was definitely, I think, a way in for her as a woman director, directing it, you know, and then it became like so many meta layers, and we were trying to make a film about something that went wrong on a film set, but it required us to actually incorporate an intimate scene on a film set. And so we had to, you know, kind of make sure everything went as well as possible and really not fall into the same traps that were happening within our story.
Right. Yeah, and you pack a real punch with a short film. I think you all know where I'm going with that, which it leads right into Stunt Women. It works both as like a fun little transition, but it's also true in that, April, once again, you have managed to tell a story that is so easily consumed on a mainstream level, okay? But there's this underlying, I don't want to say message, because that's literally not what you're doing, but this underlying critique and question as to, you know, exactly what Jeanette and Rani are talking about, like, holding everyone accountable. Like, so from, you know, erotica in the front of camera to action and, you know, another kind of high energy, get me off in some way or another, you know, from one to the other. You know, you're now looking at this, you know, stunt world, which is supposed to be like, as a, you know, as easy to talk about as sports, right? Until you start opening it up a little. And I just love the way that you crafted this film. You just, you know, you entice us in because we're looking at the badassery of these like incredible women. And then slowly, just by having them tell their stories, we start learning about just these kinds of issues that we've started to engage in this conversation. So to you, I ask the same question: what got you intrigued by this particular subject? I know you were talking about being in production on it last year when we met and looked at your previous film. I showed you previous film on the movie Palaces. So what drew you in, and how does that fit into your your overall body of work?
Well, I really enjoyed being at the fest last year and playing my documentary about movie palaces in the beautiful Roland Theater. That was a really great and special experience. And I think you just pointed out one thing that I think is a thread in I make narrative and documentary, but I have my 3 posters up here from my 3 documentary films. The first one I made was about drive-in movie theaters, the second about movie palaces, and the third about stunt women. And so what you mentioned there, first off, they're all interesting, fun, fast-moving, commercial. But at the same time, I have tons of social commentary built into all 3 of them, and subtext that makes you think. So that the films all work on multiple levels. So thank you for recognizing that. Also, for me, Stunt Women, like the other 2 films, show cinema history from different points of view that you might not usually think about. So looking at the history of cinema as seen through the eyes of the drive-in and how that played a role. And in 2020, it's playing a very big role. And the movie palaces, likewise, you know, were really integral to the film going experience for so long. So it's history of cinema told through the places where we see films. And Stunt Women is also a history of cinema, but through the eyes of stunts and women doing stunts, and realizing that in early cinema, silent films, you know, over 100 years ago, women were jumping off of motorcycles onto moving trains and doing stunts the same as they are today. So that's really cool. But I think also for this film in particular, what you were mentioning, that there is a struggle. I mean, as much as we're showing that these women are athletes and that they're incredibly smart and, you know, very determined, there has been a struggle over the years. And we talked to some of the women that were paving the way in the 60s and the 70s, and some of the struggles that they went through. And I think as a woman filmmaker, as a woman director, I feel like, you know, we're looking at stunts, but the struggle being in a heavily male-dominated industry applies to the whole film industry. So it's much more relatable than just stunts. So that's why, you know, we all see what's going on, but how they, you know, try not to let it stop them.
Yeah, and I know that you have a history. You've worked with the Sundance Institute and some festivals out there. You have a really good, in a way, insight as to the different steps and ways in which one engages with the industry. So I'm not entirely surprised that you were able to find these women, but talk to us a little bit about, you know, what's that first step? When do you say, I'm doing this story? Is it after you met someone, or then you went and found someone and it grew? How did it happen?
This particular one, it was a culmination of several different things. I had met a stunt woman. I mean, I knew one stunt woman from years ago who I met through Women in Film. And then I had met another stunt woman named Amy Johnston, who was in the film. Her boyfriend and I were working together, and he said, you need to meet my girlfriend. She's interested in working with other women filmmakers. And we met, wanted to work on something together. I had also, I think that same week, had lunch with a female DP named Svetlana Svetko, who is known for documentaries. She shot one called Inside Job that won the Oscar, and we wanted to work on something together. And then shortly after that, I know a couple of the producers on the film through Women in Film. They used to be on the board and the foundation board. And for a while, I was the manager of the Women in Film Foundation in Los Angeles. And another woman who had been involved with Women in Film wrote a book called Stunt Women, The Untold Hollywood Story, a woman named Molly Gregory. So the producers had optioned the book, and then they were looking for a director to bring the book to life as a documentary. And so that's where I came in, having already done cinema history documentaries, knowing how to deal with a lot of clips from films and how to get those cleared. And then I also, came in with a stunt woman who helped us, tell the story, get some access, and with a great DP. And so I it was just kind of a convergence of all these different things. And the book went up to around 2007. So Molly, who did the book, had done a tremendous amount of research, but then I had to keep going and do more research to bring it into the present day and figure out which stunt women, should be included in the film. So, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to make this film.
Yeah, I bet. I bet the hard part was
well, here's the thing I always tell people: how often in making a documentary do you get to shoot action sequences? I got to shoot drift car racing with Michelle Rodriguez, who is the narrator. She's also an executive producer on the film, in the car with her driver, who's one of the top drivers, male or female, in the stunt industry, and working with other, stunt men to, design that sequence and shoot that sequence. And, so I learned a lot, and it was really fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. I actually want to talk about the set in both of your films. So I'm glad you said that. We'll start with you, April, since you're already talking about this. So did you get to do any stunts? Did you, what was the plan? Like, how do you set it up? Did you never done action sequences before? How do you work this out? How do you learn? Do you learn quickly on the job?
Yeah. Well, I mean, since it's a documentary, you want to get involved with the world that the film is about. So it did take a little while for me to get in contact with the stunt women, to build relationships, to let them understand what the movie was going to be about, and let them decide if they wanted to be part of it. And so there has to be a trust in documentary in particular. I mean, I'm making a film, but it's their life, it's their livelihood. And so I'm trying to tell their story the way that they want it to be told. So there wasn't anything, like when we were looking at the historic films, the silent films, we went to the Chinese theater on Hollywood Boulevard, and we had Ben Mankiewicz from Turner Classic Movies to sort of be the film historian. And we showed some clips to the stunt women, to Michelle. That I set up to tell that piece of the story that way. I also knew that I wanted some of the younger stunt women to meet the legends, the living legends, and hear the stories directly from them of what they did and what they experienced. But the action part, I had to rely on the stunt men and women that were there to show me what they wanted to show me and to do what they wanted to do. So we knew we would go to driving training, and, we would shoot whatever happens there normally when they go to driving training, which is normal for stunt women. And then when we went out to Debbie Evans' house and we knew Michelle was going to come visit, they could show me whatever they wanted to show me, whatever seemed interesting to film. And this is what stunt people do when they're not working. They keep their chops up. So they are driving, they are fighting, they are setting themselves on fire. So we just showed stuff that they do to show you their world.
I think it was a great choice to literally activate what determination looks like. I thought that was so inspiring. I loved seeing people that were already like great at their craft, pushing themselves even further, getting really frustrated, and their willingness, like you said, the trust, their willingness to let you direct those moments and record those moments. And I assume they gave you the rights right away to do so that you could eventually use it in the edit room if you wanted to.
Yeah, of course. And you, I mean, everybody who watches the film. I have watched it with audiences before everything shut down, and you can just feel how inspired people are in the room watching this, because they're incredibly inspiring people. They're professional athletes. They're working in a very challenging field, and they're professionals at it. And you walk out of there wanting to do something, whether it's go work out or do something in your life. They definitely leave you pumped up once you see the film and very inspired.
Yeah, and I feel like trust was probably a really big piece of casting and working with and being on the set in your film, Jeanette and Rani. And like you said, like, where's that fine line between me as the director and the director that I'm directing? The obviously the fictionalized director. So maybe you can also talk a little about what your set looked like. What were some of the ways in which you communicated with the actors to kind of set a certain tone, because it's so meta. It's like what you're shooting is, so maybe you could talk a little about that. I do see we already have one comment. Keep the questions coming. We're going to come to it. So Joey, we're almost there. We're getting to the editing of these films, and that is what the question is about. But let's talk a little bit more about the setting up of the story for both of you and how you develop. We were almost in a way dancing around the subject of ethics, but in this kind of creative and bare bones way of approaching it as a filmmaker. So again, back to your set, what are some of the things that you've set up? What do you think really worked? What do you learn from playing this kind of bizarre meta game that I know you want to challenge yourself with?
Rani, I'll talk about the set part and you can talk about the meta part. How's that work?
Okay.
So it's important in working on a film or a story like this, and when you're asking the actors to portray these characters and also create an intimate scene, but also like physically be vulnerable and to physically be nearly naked in a room of 20 people. I mean, there's levels of trust that you need to build with the actors in order to be able to create a scene that actually looks like something happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, first you have to make sure that the actors know what it is you're planning on doing, right? Like, first of all, there has to be transparency about what the scene is about, and then what is actually going to be shown and how much of their actual bodies are going to be shown, right? So you have to be really transparent at the beginning. Then the scene itself was rehearsed with an intimacy coordinator and myself and just the actors on the set that we were going to use the day before we shot that scene. So then it was just like we really choreographed it. It's very specific. And we also began using an exercise that I had learned in intimacy coordinating workshops, but also that the woman that was working with the actors brought into the room, which was also about the actors establishing trust with each other, so that there was this relationship and this connection could have some reality, right? So you have to be able to have permission, and you have to broker consent on set before you can actually do a scene like this. So all of that, so actually, working with the actors so that they feel like they can connect with each other, then choreographing the scene, and then making sure that they know what the scene is going to be about. Now, you do that in a very private setting in rehearsal, and no matter how much you talk about what it's going to be like having 20 other people in the room to shoot the scene, that's a little bumpy road. And we actually had a little, we had to kind of build into that, like kind of breathe into that, because at first there was there's a little difficulty shooting the scene because of how different rehearsal was, and the intimacy and kind of the bubble of privacy that we had, how different that is once you open up the set. So then it was just about, how do we create, I talk a lot about how do you be private in public, right? How do you be intimate in public? How do you be private in public? And as a director, you're often trying to do that with an actor. You're trying to create a sense of privacy so that you can talk about character, and you can talk about what the scene is about, or you can talk about the moment while all this other commotion is going on. So, creating a space where the actors felt like they could do their work,
Mm-hmm.
and that it will.
What do you think she was going to say, Rani? You've worked together long enough.
Oh, did you lose me?
Oh, she's back.
When did you lose me? Anyway, so yeah, it's about creating a safe space for the actors, and then about creating a safe space for the crew, because once I had seen what our actress was going to be able to deliver in rehearsal, I knew how upset I was, like how many things in me that pushed. And I knew that could happen to anyone on the set while we were filming it. So then making it clear to everyone on set that the material is difficult, mm-hmm. and that it's okay if they have to leave. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? That I felt very lucky and very honored that everyone was in that room. Everyone was in that room doing that work, and the actors in particular, but everyone, right? The sound, camera, that everyone was on board to do this scene, even though, without even just hearing it, just hearing it in the room, it was hard.
This is actually literally how the film starts, is the sound.
It's how it starts, and it's the first scene. It's the first scene we shot.
Right.
The first thing we did. So you often, when you shoot a film, you usually leave the hardest scene for last, or in the middle, but not the very first day. So it was the first thing we shot. Yeah. Every film shoot has so many stories, right? There's a multitude, but yeah. So working on set, it's about creating the safe space for the actors to be able to do the work that they're going to do. And in this particular situation, we started with something that's very challenging to ask an actor to do in front of others. And then we went from there. Yeah. Rani, you want to talk about meta?
I think you just did. But yes, Rani, if you want to add more to that, you literally just did, Jeanette. See that? Go ahead.
When I showed, so one of the reasons we had to shoot that scene first was because we needed that footage, in other sections, and we needed to be able to get that ready. So when we first got that footage, and I showed the two actors, just because I had to build the website, right, for the other thing, and I showed them what it looked like, and the actress said, "It's sexy until it's not." And I was like, that's it. So you have to make it, we had to make it sexy and then not, and create that reaction in anybody who was watching it. And that was really challenging. And I know one of the things that we had, both in discussion and in planning and in pre-production, and as we were going into this and even in writing it, it's an 8-minute short. It's less than 8 minutes, but it takes place on a film set. And, there's a character who's a director who is making a film. There's actors who are in this film. So we had to know what the film was that they were making. There was a feature film that they were making, and we had to make this scene that was supposed to be so important. And so we spent so much time working on the scene, but it's not really the story of this film, right? But I had to make a fake script that had sections in it for the props, and I had to write dialogue, and I had to create credits. And we had to know, we kept switching which location we were going to use for the exterior shoot. And so that would sort of switch what we thought the type of film it was. And, but, by the time we got to production, I kind of want to write that script because I know what it is now. And it's this sort of noir film about a guy who's a detective who's, you know, trying to track down a serial killer who's killing prostitutes. And so he meets this prostitute and falls in love with her in the like we had like a whole story, you know, that sort of came out of that. And that started to become really real to me, that film as well. And so sort of started to become invested into this fake film that never gets made, right? As far as the meta thing. I can't see you guys. This is, I don't know.
Aw, we're here for you.
I guess that's what I have to say about meta. So that was, it was a great set. It was just such a great group of people that were working on set that were very generous and respectful and efficient. And everybody that joined sort of was invested in what we were trying to do, I think.
Yeah, and as you both talking, I keep thinking, and I know we've put these films together and we've given a lot of thought to that, but you just added this whole other layer of the steps that needs to be taken in terms of safety in both directions. April, your film talks so much about that. And, you know, they both use body doubles. They both need stunt or intimacy coordinators. They both require a level of consent. Like you said earlier, Jeanette, like everybody has signed up, or was it you, Rani, that everyone signed up for this? Everyone knows that this is okay. Everyone's agreed to it, and yet lines get crossed. And one of the things I'm hearing both from you, Jeanette, when you talked about the history and what you wanted to bring into the story from your own experience as a director and like watching what had happened with that play that you had talked about, you know, April, there was an interesting choice that you made in your film where you wanted two generations to be talking to each other at every given time. When we meet one of the new stunt women, they're talking to someone else who's been around. We're talking about like Doris Day's double, Pam Grier's double. Like, I don't know how you found these incredible women, you know, people who double for Sharon Stone, you know, we're getting closer to our generation, right? Captain Marvel, Westworld, Matrix, Hunger Games, but man, Doris Day's double, you got Pam Grier's double, and then you put that intergenerational conversation in, which is kind of built into the story in your film, Quiet on the Set. Like, there's so much we know about that history. We bring that so it can happen in 8 minutes. And April, in yours, you really just kind of slowed things down. It gave us a moment to really look at that intergenerational dialogue. So maybe first talk about that intergenerational decision that you made. And I want to come back then to talk about consent and safety that Jeanette brought up earlier. So talk a little bit about why you decided to put both generations in the room.
Well, we tried to make it an action documentary. And so we tried to have as few talking heads as we could. And we still have some, mostly reserved for the directors, the film directors that are talking. We have Paul Feig and Paul Verhoeven and Ann Fletcher. And so those were talking heads. And then just out of logistics, a couple other people ended up being that way. But the whole idea to keep it lively, to keep it action throughout, was always to have the stunt women interacting with each other and learning from each other, whether they're training or, you know, whatever they're doing. And especially for those intergenerational conversations. You know, again, we were bringing a book to life, but, you know, the people that are still alive that are, you know, part of the history, we wanted to let them tell the stories, you know, live, the way that they saw the story. And I felt like, you know, we could have had them talking straight in the camera, telling those stories to the audience, but I just felt like it added an extra layer to the emotional journey that when the younger stunt women are hearing, you know, from the horse's mouth, what these women went through, and they can relate to it on such a different level because they're both doing the career. I just felt like emotionally it was, you know, a better way to go than just having them, you know, in a frame talking, but really interacting with somebody else who's doing it, coming, you know, on the road that they paved.
And did they know each other from before, the two women that you had put in each one? Like, how did, you know, I guess we're talking about casting. Like, how did you?
Yeah. No, Amy Johnston is with Doris Day's double, Julianne Johnson and Johnston. They had not met. And Jeannie Epper, who's one of the most, you know, famous and well-regarded stunt women. She was Linda Carter's stunt double, and many others along her career. She's had a 50-year career. She and Amy had not met yet. And JD David, who you mentioned is Pam Greer's double, she and Alima Dorsey, they had met once before briefly, but not having this intimate level of discussion. So we were capturing, the real discussion.
I just have to share with you. I don't know if you're aware, but I was raised Hasidic, which we didn't watch TV or movies or anything like that. And I discovered a hidden television in my parents' bedroom somewhere hidden in a closet when I was a kid. And I would cut school. I don't know how I was doing well despite all that. And race back home, and married couples have separate beds. So I literally remember sitting between the two beds and just watching Linda Carter do all this stuff, and just to see her double, I was just like, it was like, Pearl, you're between the double beds.
That was one of the eras when you thought there was going to be a lot more women doing action on screen, because not only did you have Wonder Woman, then you had Charlie's Angels, which had a lot of sexiness to it, but it was also women detectives, and there was a lot of action, a lot of stunt women in that. And you also had the Bionic Woman. So
Right.
you had, some of the top series on television at the time were these really female forward action series. And then you get into kind of the 80s and it kind of dipped again. And now we're kind of back.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a really important era.
Yeah, and so transition then a little to talk about, it was great that you paired them together. I obviously felt very connected, and, they did empower me. I clearly left that community. So I kind of did my bionic leap from one place to another. But you then, instead of just kind of hinting at that, and you did talk about those, the trends of kind of active or action-driven women, and women who could cross that line in front of camera. But talk about what's going on behind the camera, because you do look a little more deeply at those issues that both Rani and Jeanette deal in a much more obvious way with erotic work or sex scenes, and where questions of trust would have been nice if they came into play in a more sensitive and ethical way when vulnerabilities are required. They're required in both. So yeah, talk about that and where lines were crossed.
Well, I think when it comes to the stunt profession, it's a very small community, which includes the stunt women and the stunt men, because they do work so closely. They do have each other's lives literally in their hands at some point. So there's just a level of family and professionalism that crosses the whole industry. But traditionally, you might see a whole team of stunt men and maybe one stunt woman doubling the lead actress. And things are starting to change now. After talking and meeting these people, I know they're very focused on safety first. And I didn't meet anybody who I felt like was intentionally being oppressive to women or to people of color. I really do think it's just sort of how the industry evolved, and some of the systems that give more opportunities to some of the men. And then as the stunts get more difficult, then they have more experience and they have more on their resume. So it kind of perpetuates over time. But there's a lot of material now that is female driven, that has females in the lead and people of color in the lead. You look at films like Wonder Woman, Black Panther, and Captain Marvel, and all these things, and a lot of television series too. And the more that you have diversity on screen, then you have more behind screen too. And so things are starting to evolve and change in a direction that I think everybody's very happy about.
Yeah. And a lot of it does have to do with women coming together and representing themselves, whether with unions or coming out and telling their stories.
Well, they're all one union. They're all SAG.
Well, there's a stunt women's organization that the women
association. Yes. So we cover that in the film, especially in the late 60s, kind of in line with the civil rights movement and the women's movement. while that was being pushed, that's when some of these pioneers formed their own groups. So the Stunt Women's Association formed in 1967, and the Black Stuntmen's Association formed with women as founding members because they all understood that they were fighting the same fight to make sure that they were represented in the stunt world. So that kind of went along with what was happening socially. And there are still a lot of stunt groups now for all different cross sections. There's a website, stuntpoc.com, for stunt people of color, of all genders. There's several different stunt men's associations, Stunts Unlimited, which was founded by Hal Needham, who a lot of people know because he started directing films like Cannonball Run and Smokey and the Bandit. There are some women that now are members of Stunts Unlimited, including Melissa Stubbs, who's in our film, who does some second unit directing and stunt coordinating. So things are opening up for sure.
Right. Right. And Jeanette, I know you have to leave us. I actually think it's a good transition into thanking you for being here with us. Rani, would you be able to stay and take any additional questions about the film? And the reason I think it's a good transition is because of what you were saying about women speaking more openly, getting their stories told, and advocating for each other. Is there something else you want to share with us before you have to leave?
Oh, you said that somebody had a question about editing, and
They did. The question is from Joey. It's specific to April, but I actually think it works for both. So if you can answer that, that would be great, about your choices as a director for Quiet on Set. And then after you go, April, I'll have you talk about it. Thank you for your question, Joey Greco. He wants to know, what is your editing process like? And he says specifically to you, April, creating a documentary. But Jeanette, what about you trying to pack so much into one 8-minute short? And I know you've done shorts before, so maybe talk a little about your editing process.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I did a shout out to our editor, Bonnie Ray Brickman. Yeah, Bonnie looks at all the footage before I come and sit with her, but then we sit together. And it's one of the, I have this great journey with the film, and that I, really strong collaboration with Rani, really working with the DP and the actors. And then I get to be in the room with the editor, and I get to share a brain with very many people. And with Bonnie, we certainly, we sit next to each other for the whole time and like share a brain, which is exciting. And then we send cuts to Rani and we get notes, and then we go back in. And this film, to really, we really worked. It was hard to get it down to 8 minutes. It was longer. The opening scene was over a minute, and we were worried, after we saw it, we were worried that film festival screeners would turn it off because they would think it was porn. So that we had to okay, so what are we going to do? So we're still telling the story, and what's essential for the story, and then the cutting into the people watching, So there's a lot of decisions that you make based on, there's the script, there's what we shot, and then okay, how is this going to be received, and is it really telling the story in the way that we think the story can unfold, and that the story contains everything that we want it to contain. Thank you all. April, I'm sorry I haven't seen your film, but now I can't wait.
Oh, you will. Yes,
I can't wait to see it. So I'm thinking of all the people that I'm going to tell to see it, and I'm so excited about your film, and I think it's genius that you did the generational thing, because I just think that, of course, what a great way to make history come to life when people can actually connect with each other. So I'm going to Google you as soon as I'm finished with what I just have to do and figure out how I can see your film, because I'm really excited about it. So I'm excited I was on a panel with you, and thank you so much. Pearl, it was such a pleasure to see you again. And you're a genius. You're great at these things. So thank you. And Rani, we'll talk tomorrow.
Yeah,
so, everybody.
Jeanette, I'm going to make Rani answer the question about what you're working on now. And for a fact that we love you here at the Center Film Festival, because we actually showed a previous work of yours when we partnered with the State College Pride Film Festival in June. So we would love to have you back. Thank you for joining us. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.
Well, April, do you want to pick up on that? So what is your editing process?
Yeah, so documentary editing. So for all my films, and this one in particular, it's kind of a balance of things. We had an editor who came on board named Jonathan Shaw, and he was very experienced and did a really great job. When you're dealing with a lot of clips and people talking about stunts that they did and finding the clips, that was something that you have to do that you don't have to do in a narrative film, and then figuring out how to integrate those into the stories. So I spent a lot of time looking for good clips, and looking for the clips that people were talking about. One of our producers, Daniel Poor, there's a part where JD David is talking about a van on the set of Chips that she was driving that went into the water, and he watched every single episode of Chips looking for that episode, and he finally found it, and we have it in the film.
It's so good.
So that's pretty cool. And then I also edit on the Movie Palaces documentary. I edited the whole thing, and my producer did a lot of the visual effects and cleaned up my edit. So we did edit that one. On Stunt Women, there's sections of it that I edited, and then Jonathan cleaned up, but he did most of it. And it was tough because literally we had so much good stuff. We probably could have made 5 documentaries and they all would have been interesting, because there was, just, you could have gone into more depth on pretty much everything that we talked about. So it was tough to narrow it down, I think was probably the biggest challenge. But we wanted it to be an action documentary. We didn't want it to be boring. So we wanted to keep the pace, to feel right for this story. So I think that was probably the hardest part of that one, was just, figuring out how to trim it.
Yeah, I think for me, having known both of your bodies of work so far, I just feel like the other thing you both have in common, which isn't exactly why it was programmed together, but I think you really know your audiences. And it's so clear, like project to project, like April, for you, one of the strengths that speak to me of your work is, you're aware of a more mainstream desire to know about certain things. You don't want to alienate that, what we're calling mainstream, which is getting questioned anyway. And at the same time, allowing for that level of question and, looking a little more deeply at the situation. And you do it with it's just so specific to you, April, the way that I was going to say grace, but I don't even know if that's what it is. And with whether it's a combination of archival footage and giving us an opportunity to look at it in a new way by giving us time to watch it and listen to people talking, the intergenerational element of it. Or the way you edit it and the order in which you tell it.
Yeah, you're right. It's like I said earlier, and like I said, I appreciate so much you seeing that, and a few people I've been interviewing with recently, as they've been looking at the body of work, have noticed this too, and that makes me really happy, because you want your voice to come across in your work. So yeah, I like things to be fun and commercial and fast paced, but I'm sneaking in messages. Right. So that you feel it and you understand and you hear those messages and you think about them afterwards, and that helps them land more than just informationally. It gets you thinking. So that's what I try to do. Yeah.
And I feel like in your case, Rani, I don't want to put it in a box either, but I do feel like it's very unflinching. Like this is the story, and it's going to make you think right out the bat. And whether it's through comedy, because I don't think from so far, it doesn't look like you're particular about any genre, but from a content perspective, it seems to say, hear this and think about this.
Yeah, I liked what you just said. Because I thought, that's really interesting, because I do think that, I come from kind of more of a performance art kind of background, and a little bit more.
So much sense, Rani.
A little avant-garde, but at the same time, and Jeanette comes from more of a subculture, making content for her community. And I do think, like, what we've been doing lately, it is sort of this hybrid of teetering with some, sort of fringe, but trying to make it accessible. Like Heather Has Four Moms was meant to be accessible, but also for the lesbian and queer community. And I think this one, also, you know, it has that, it is kind of unflinching, and it is, but it's not quite like experimental. It's not quite out there, but it's still, it's hard. Like, you know, I was at another film festival and we were talking about, you know, response. It's not a film where I expect people to come up and say, I loved your film. Oh, I just loved it. Like, that's not, usually somebody comes up and go like, oh my God, I hated your film. I was thinking about it like 3 days later. Like, and it's like, yes, that's actually, that's the correct response for this film. And that's okay. I've been sad because we haven't had the chance to screen it live in a cinema since
I know that is hard.
And I do feel like this, well, I think most of my films and our films have been made for the screen, for an audience. There's something about the timing and being in an audience when that moment, the sort of collective gasp or the collective breath hold happens, right? That it's just different from watching it on your laptop screen. And I'm sad that I haven't gotten to be in a room and see that happen and see if it's landing. I think it is. I mean, I feel like it's a certain amount of alchemy you have to kind of go from the editing room and the space and know that it's going to blow up on a screen and have a collective experience that's going to be greater than watching it on a computer. And I think this film has that. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten to see it yet. So.
Well, I have to say, in both of your cases, your work is very brave. And I'm just so excited to have both of you returning here to the Center Film Festival Workshop, as the case is. And just to say our final goodbye, I really like to hear what you're working on so we can check out your work, or let us know where we can check out your work. Rani, do you want to tell us what you're working on?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, Jeanette and I had a script that we were kind of working on before that's a feature. When we were making this film, we were at OU and we were talking, and it was Mom's Weekend. And and this is how it is. We're talking, and something happens, and I just look at Jeanette like, this is our next film. So that's our next film, Mom's Weekend. And it's kind of a comedy. I think it starts out, it's not fully developed yet. It's still like in the development process. And, you know, once the pandemic happened, it just hasn't felt right. But, you know, it sort of starts out as a bridesmaids, girls trip kind of tone. And then it changes into a sort of revenge comedy, revenge horror, dark comedy with these moms that want to get revenge on a fraternity for raping their daughters kind of thing, I think is what it turns into, like a revenge film.
Oh.
We also have, you know, we have Heather Has Four Moms. We have an initial pilot script for that. So if we could ever develop that into something. Meanwhile, and we have a short that was supposed to be like our low budget short, sort of about in response to the election and the divided community. Just, you know, about a brother, or about two siblings after their parents died, dividing up the house and having to sell the house, and coming together, and just like the politics and the situation, they just can't, you know, the division's too big. And then I've been taking workshops on handmade film crafts. So I've been playing with some experimental cyanotype and other processes. And this pandemic, I've been writing and making, I've been developing, I kind of have a collection of monologues and short scenes. There's two halves. The first half is the like adapting to the pandemic, and the second half is like coming to terms or with the George Floyd murder and the Black Lives Matter protests. And so all the characters have like two scenes, and I can film them all via Zoom, and they're all like filmable with cell phones or webcam. And so that's, you know, the thing that I've been kind of working on over the summer. So,
and Rani's working on all of this and also teaching film at Ball State University, David Letterman's alma mater, in Muncie, Indiana. Thank you, Rani. We're looking forward to seeing one of these many forthcoming projects. April, what about you?
Well, let's see. I I had quite a blow with the COVID because after we, I don't think I won an award from you last year. I think I was just the opening night film with this one, with the Going Attractions, the definitive story of the Movie Palace, and you were kind of a preview screening, and then I had a theatrical release. And
Right.
so I was traveling when COVID kind of hit. I had been playing for a week in Chicago. And since I'm from Chicago, I had gone to those screenings. And then I was supposed to be heading out to New York for our New York City premiere. And the kibosh went on all of that. And then just through, timing delays, whatever, now both of these films have released on VOD over the last few weeks. Stunt Women came out at the end of September. And you can watch it here, of course, at the Center Film Festival. But if you don't get a chance to see it here, it is streaming on Apple, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, Fandango Now, Vudu, everywhere you can see a new release. So it's out there. And then the definitive story of the Movie Palace also just came out a couple weeks ago, the same way. It's on all those platforms, also on DVD. And I just announced on Tuesday that we partnered with Turner Classic Movies to release the film for broadcast. So it will be on Turner Classic Movies in the future, but you can see it on VOD right now. And in the meantime, I've just, so I've got two new movies out right now during COVID, which is pretty crazy. But in the meantime, I've just been trying to write and develop new things, both future documentary projects and narrative and series. The first feature I made was a narrative feature, and then I got on this documentary thing recently. So I'm just trying to work on a whole list of stuff as well and try to make the best of this time as much as I can.
Incredible. I knew that this conversation would be inspiring just based on your films alone. But wow, this last question is like, all right. And it just goes to show you that something as difficult, pivotal, powerful, loaded as the time that we're living in right now, it can actually be fodder for very inspiring work. And so we're looking forward to seeing what you can do with what's happening in our world today. And for those who are wondering if we're dealing with the pandemic at all, we are showing pandemic shorts tomorrow at 10 a.m. And having a conversation after with those directors. And I'm sure, you've already heard April and Rani talk about how the pandemic has affected them as filmmakers and creators. I just want to say thank you personally. A little bit more information. I was actually Rani's professor back in the day, and the cinematographer, Wenting's professor. So it's just so nice. We were talking about intergenerationality, where we're, colleagues. Not that we weren't colleagues before, but we're colleagues now, and I keep learning from both of you. And
Pearl and I both had films in the Flickers Rhode Island Festival. Is how we became aware of each other. Yeah.
April, that is how we met. That is right. That we met at a film festival. That's right. Yeah. And so we're a little sad that we can't all have you meet here at a film festival, but we're also very grateful that you called in from LA, from Muncie. And where was Jeanette? DC?
Athens.
In Athens, Ohio, right, where she's teaching at Ohio University.
She's in tech she's in tech right now for a theater show. That's why she had to leave.
Got it. And we're just so grateful that you were here. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the audience that was here and asked us questions. And you'll be seeing us very shortly in our next live Q&A, because virtual film festivals, boy, are they an experience. Thank you, April. Thank you, Rani.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for showing the film.
And we hope to see you back here again at the Center Film Festival.
All right.